Okay, Jeff here. I'm in a restaurant in this restaurant, so I hope there's not going to be too much noise here. I'm speaking English to people already me in French, at least are a little ways away. They won't understand anything I'm saying here. That's the advantage of this. Um, so there might be a little bit of music, but it's not too loud, so it should be okay. But I got better lighting here, and I got a lot better lighting, and I got the background. I used to try to get to where there's a nice, cool looking background too, but a lot better than if I did it at my house. So, okay. Um, the first one of the first trait I want to cover, the traits I want to cover are the American culture, and of course, this is not just American culture traits specifically, but how the Americans value it and see it as a specific way. And I'm going to mention that compared to other cultures, I've seen how this works. So one of the values is about religion and how Americans perceive. I don't want to say perceive religion, how they perceive Christianity. Okay, as a religion. And the the book that I will suggest that you read, which you must read to understand America, which is a good book, an excellent book. Okay, it's by Mark Noll. It's Noel Marsden, and Hatch. I got to think of their first names. I think it's Mark Noll, George Hamston, and I think Nathan Hatch. Um, but just look for The Search for Christian America. The Search for Christian America. Again, The Search for Christian America. It came out in 1983. The publisher, I can't remember the name here. I don't have it, but just look it up and look it up on the internet. You'll find it immediately. The Search for Christian America. I read that, and I'm gonna shout out to Daniel Skalberg, my history professor when I was at Multnomah University in the mid 1980s, because he actually had us read this book, and that was a book I never regretted reading. And I took every one of his history classes afterwards because it was just there was why this is one of the history classes I took after I took his first history classes. He's just an excellent professor, but I mean, top of the top. Okay, to motivating people on and learn about history stuff that most people don't like to learn, right? He made that really fun, really fun. And this was one of the books that he had us read. He made us really think deep, okay? Think real deep about the culture in which we were brought up. At least the majority of the students there in those classes were from America. Some were foreigners, or immigrants, or children of immigrants, or something. But the majority had been around for a number of generations. So and he really made us think deep about what are some of the cultural traits of that culture, okay, and Christianity, or how Americans perceive Christianity as a religion and how it's specifically viewed. It's a very key thing to American culture. So that book will help you give a really great background as a depth behind it. And but I'll kind of cover this here because what I'm thinking about is I cover this in a separate little kind of different way. I see it as a I don't just take the book and say I'm going to repeat the book. I have kind of living in other cultures for half of my life, and I've seen how I kind of reflect back and think about this book all the time and think about how other cultures see this in different ways. Okay, so I won't talk about the book now. I'll just talk about some things that I have seen, perceived, and found to be true. Okay, and reflect American culture. So Americans, unlike others, I mean, I'll give an example of the French, and I'll always kind of reflect to the French a lot because I've lived in France for 30 years. I married into the culture. I have had children that brought up in the culture and as bicultural children, but who are more French than actually American. They just heard American English from me. They get to watch American, typically American. Everything that cat had to watch on television or screens or anything had to be in English. So they always got a good dose of that. But they were brought up in French school systems and all that. So I've seen comparatively, I see how they have struggled to be a kind of a passive Americans, or at least got it from me, whatever they got from me. Um, I passed on it a lot to them because of culture. Okay, but I'm a hybrid, so I'm kind of half French, if you want, at that. But the French are the one thing about the French, and I'll and that come back to the Americans too. And there's another good book too to compare the French and Americans culture wise. Is Pascal Baudry, Baudry, Pascal with no e at the end, Pascal Baudry, Baudry. Pascal, I'm gonna shout out to you, and I'm gonna tag you in this well. Okay, um, he had a great book, excellent book as well, called French and Americans, The Other Shore. Now, it was actually a translation from the equivalent, actually, the translation, it was in French originally, because he's a Frenchman that moved to America, both he and his wife, and then, they immigrated there and took on, nationality over there, but have been over in the United States for, the past 30 years as well. And he teaches basically coaching sessions to managers from France and Europe to learn about American culture, how American culture works, and how American management works. So a lot of the stuff I'm going to be doing actually kind of reflects that too, because I had been thinking about this in parallel with him, and we actually kind of coincided when I wrote my book about my article about how working with the French. And when I said that, then I discovered what he had been thought about said being at the Americans and the French, and what I had already been saying about the Americans and French. And he just, when I read him, sent my article, he wrote back and said nothing to highlight, and he sent me his book. And I was reading his book, which is saying I have, I have another video series on the French, how to work in the French, but but I just want to say that he in his book, and he made an English version of it, translated English version of it, of a majority of the chapters, not all of them, but it came from the French version, so I'm not going to. Les Français, les Américains, l'autre rive. And then the English version is the French and Americans, the other shore. Great book because it says some of the same thing, many of the same things I've said, but in a longer format because he had been doing a lot more surveys on stuff. When I had been doing this kind of, for my free time and doing this over 30 years, he had been doing it professionally as part of his job, which he coaches some people. So we got some, as he said, we have cross validation here. So these are my thoughts, but they reflect a lot of his because some of the sentences I read in his book, I said that 2 years ago, and he didn't know I had said it too. So it was good. But for the American part, and he had talked about some of religion too in his book. So I mean, he talked about a lot of things I'm going to talk about are the same things he talked about, but I'm just saying in a different kind of perspective or order that he did in the book, his book. Okay, they're just same things, but just ordered in prioritized in a different way, in slightly different ways of saying it. Okay, but we had different paths of how we learned it, so we present it slightly differently. But I'm saying slightly differently because it's just two slightly different flavors of the same ice cream cone. Okay, or what do you want to call this thing? Or snow cone, I call it. The religion for Americans. I've already talked about the Church for Christian America. I've already mentioned probably in one of these other chapters or subchapters about how Americans, the Americans are kind of like the Northern Europeans, with the whole Christmas thing of presenting Christmas, the Christmas lights, putting the Christmas in front of the Christmas tree in front with the lights in front of the window, being open to the rest of the world, whereas the Catholics tend to be closed and kind of hide the Christmas tree inside of the house, off in the corner, and and have fences around the house and big walls around their house. The French Catholics tend to. You don't see that in other cultures, even for the South. So the more Catholic it is, the more closed it is, the more Protestant it is, Northern cultures, and then more open. And you'll see this too. You'll see this when you cross the border, going from. You really see a difference when you go from the French. You really see a difference when you go from the French border to Switzerland and to Germany. I mean, it's just night and day, because you begin to see the the different the difference in the cultures with regard to around the houses. I mean, you go to Germany and you don't have big walls around the houses, and Germans now Germans did have they were Catholics, but remember that there's a whole Martin Luther In 1517, the whole Lutheranism came into play with Martin Luther posting all these theses, the 95 theses on the wall there in Worms near Heidelberg, right? So I visited there. I mean, it's a really cool place, really cool place. If you want to get some deep history, go there. I went with a backpack, slept out in the open there with a backpack in Heidelberg and stuff. That was way before I got jobs. I don't dare say that to my colleagues in SAP now because it's near Heidelberg. So yeah, I tell them sometimes, but yeah. That was way when I was a poor student. But the whole the whole thing there of religion comes into play where you see a difference. And actually, Germans. I'm going to come back to the French here in a second, but the Germans actually have to state their religion on their identity card. At least a few years ago. Is it still true today? I'm not sure, but it was several years ago. So a very important thing that you have to do. Now the French. I'm saying these others so we can understand, compare it with the Americans, right? The French, the big thing is what they call a darn. I don't. It's called laïque, which is in principle it should be laity. But the problem with the word in laity in American English, it means the lay people rather than and maybe even trained lay people in the church who are they are not the clergy, okay? That's the difference. Whereas in French culture, the concept of laity, or to be laïque, and I don't, this is, it's to be, it's to be accepted. You're allowing to have, you're allowed to have, you're supposed to allow to each one to present and promote themselves, to be equal. All religions are equal and have the equal opportunity. I'm going to call this equal opportunity. So you cannot favor one over the other. And the French actually do respect that by always, whenever they're doing something, they're going to allow each one to have it. So I've seen cases here in France where if the town hall allows a Christian church to build a new premises on a property, they got to do it for the Muslims too, and for other religions. So they don't want to favor one over the other. Okay, they make it equal opportunity for each religion um, to be able to have equal opportunity, to have equal communication, marketing if you want, um, and to be able to be represented. Like, and this is all over. They go to the hospitals and they'll say you can't, they can't promote one religion over the other, and they can't favor one religion over the other. They just don't do it. Okay. So it's very stated a lot. And this is also when if you want to become if you want to become a citizen France, you cannot you they can't force you to abandon a religion to be able to become French. Okay, you have equal opportunity if you have religious beliefs that allow you for some things and others. Okay, so this all comes in play for the French. Okay, so I'm giving a couple different cultures where I've lived in or worked in and enough to know them well enough. I'm going to come back to the Americans because these cultures have a kind of difficult time understanding Americans and how Americans perceive it. Now we're going to come to the Americans. Now Americans, again, the United States of America. I'm not talking about los Estados Unidos de Mexico, okay? The United States of Mexico, because yes, there's another United States, right? So, um, but many people don't even know that. Actually, Americans in the United States don't know that Mexico is the United States too, but it's just the United States of Mexico. So um, I do know that too. Um, but the Americans see, again, Americans means United States of America, okay? I'm going to use that just in general because that's what most people say, okay? I'm just using what most people say. The the perception of religion in America is that there is this it's a value that has two it's a trait that has two values, and this we'll see this across the things I'm mentioning this and these other traits. It's not that you have two opposing traits where you have um, it's not like it's we're going to come to the Muslim thing too, right? Because 9/11 in January of or September, sorry, of September of the 11th of September in 2001 changed the world, right? And it was based on a religious belief, right? That there were terrorists that attacked because of a lot of this religious background, but terrorism, kind of extremist type stuff. Um, and not just that, but I mean, there are a lot of reasons. But one of them was because of religious backgrounds, because those that attacked were of a different religion, right? And that's what Americans perceive this attack, or they perceive it as a war. And I'm going to get into that in another whole chapter. That's a whole other chapter of this book. But war and battles and all that kind of stuff. But the whole thing of the religion aspect is that it's not that Americans see it as you are you're a Christian, and I'm going to say Protestant Christian. But let's say Christian just in general, okay? Because that can still hold the Catholics, include the Catholics and others. And I don't want to go into all these other. I don't want to go into all the different flavors because that gets into a little more complicated debate, which I don't want to get into here. And I got other books I've actually dealt with it there. So, but I'm not going to get into the other flavors of Christendom, okay? Because that begins to create another war in itself, and I don't want to get into that here in this book. Okay, I got other books I've dealt with it, as I mentioned. But the whole thing is you are Christian or you are anti-Christian. Okay. Um, Whereas, like I said, in the French, it's you're allowed to be whatever flavor you want. So you can be equal opportunity or equal representation of if you're Protestant, if you're Anglican, and I'm going to make a difference here. Protestant and Anglican are different because I got another book on that too. Um, so you can Protestant and the Protestant evangelical, okay, and you can be Anglican, you be Catholic, Roman Catholic, you can be Hindu, you can be Muslim, which is Islam, okay, the religion is Islam, and others, and we can go on and begin to name all of them, okay. But those are kind of a lot of the major ones. Um, See, in France, it would be like, well, which one are you, right? Which one are you among all those? Which one are you? And then you get to just have your equal opportunity, equal promotion, equal whatever, and you can have the right to be able to declare that and say that you get to say that and you get to have that, okay? But see, in America, it's you're either Christian or you're any of those other pagans. I don't want to say pagan here, but let's say you're not. So it's a action linguistics. Action this I see this a lot, and we can get this a lot of in linguistic semantics. You have a trait, and then you label the trait as plus or minus. It's like going to McDonald's, right? When you go to McDonald's, and I'm sitting here at McDonald's right now, and I see this. You get the kiosk over there, right? And you make the request in the kiosk to order. You order your burger or whatever you order, and you can personalize it right in the kiosk, and you can personalize your drink if you want to have ice or not, right? And you say plus or minus, or if you want to have peanuts with your sundae, you say plus or minus. You can take it or add it, right? See, Americans kind of see it the same way. You are plus Christian or you're negative. You're not. Um, I want you to think about that, um, because Americans tend to be kind of binary thinking, right? Everything's black or white. I'm not allowed to say black or white. Well, I'm not to say blacklist, okay? So, um, but we don't like this black or white thing, right? Because it brings up slavery. But I'm not mentioning that. The word black or white means on or off. It means 0 or 1, okay? So in softer coding, we say 0 or 1. Or in some other things, we say on or off. Or in other ones, we say black or white. We just mentioned different kind of binary flavors of things, right? Of a trait. So Americans tend to be very binary. There isn't a third trait. We're going to come back to this, and we see this as we come back to finally get to a conclusion about this. But for the origin thing, again, it's not which one are you of the many. It's are you or are you not that specific religion? And a lot of this is down to Americans tend to have this kind of false view of the history of America, and that's why I said you got to go read that book, The Search for Christian America, because I think it's really important to really dig into the deep things. Now, I'm not going to go begin to do have a deep study right now of the Pilgrims right here. Um, that's what that book does. But you'll see that a lot of Americans say, yes, we have a Christian history too, because we've, the founders of America, they were Christian. Well, they believed in deities. They were deists, and anybody that says they weren't doesn't know history. Okay, that's why you got to read that book. Um, and those that continue to say we were Christians because they were Christians because they just don't know their history. Okay, they just don't know history. They're kind of saying stuff they don't know much about. And usually Americans are pretty bad at studying history. Most people actually are pretty bad at studying history, but Americans are really bad at it. And everybody I knew actually was sucked at history, except for I was the best, one of the two people in history class, in American history class, that we want to do quizzes and stuff. You have two teams. Well, I was usually on one team, and one of the first people up, and there were two of us, and we were kind of the ones that kind of began the lead of the teams, and we had picked our team members who we want to help us win the quiz, right? So I knew my history really well, really, really well, and this whole thing was. This has a whole huge chunk of American history to it, because American history is only 300 years old. So and there's a bunch of colonies and stuff. I came to France like, hey, there's like thousands of years of history here to learn. You got to learn a lot more stuff. The American history is so short compared to it. It's a drop in the bucket. But the American thing is, so we talked about this plus and minus value thing, and then we've got kind of these other aspects of the deity part, okay, the deists, and the beginning of American history, the founders. And if you look at the Constitution, it doesn't say Jesus or anything in it. It doesn't. It doesn't obviously the Lord our God. I mean, it actually it reflects kind of a deist point of view. Got to go and dig deep in the deist. I'm not going to begin to do a deist theology. I'm not going to do an applied theology book here. Got to go read the other books. Okay, and my other book too, because I talk about other things in another book too. I have another book kind of mention this a little bit, but to go read the book of the Search for Christian America. Then the whole thing. Well, but let's on our money, right? Oh, I don't have any money here. I could actually. I do have a couple dollar bills sitting up at home, but I forgot to bring those. I should have brought them here to show a dollar bill. Because on the back of the dollar bill, what does it say? In God we trust, right? And they keep saying, well, look, it's in our money. It's in our money, the Americans say. So that proves religion, right? In God we trust. Well, I'm going to challenge Americans here in the book, and actually other non-Americans, go look up when was that statement put into American currency? When was that put into it? And from what I recall, it was actually put in the 1950s, which is kind of late, right? It wasn't put back in the 1700s. It wasn't put in the money back then. It was very late, the 1950s, after 1900. That's a couple hundred years after the rest. So no, In God We Trust was not an original concept. It's not something that's been around for a few hundred years. It's been around for less than 100 years. So that's late. So we can't claim that as an early trait. And it's something that it's come in with later stuff. So it's invalid to claim that as a beginning thing. Okay? Very, very invalid. Sorry about the little bit of noise here, but people go sit down. Then, so these are things that I want you to begin to feel this as I begin to go through and explain other traits in a similar way here of doing. And I don't know where this chapter is going to happen in the rest of the chapters. I don't know if it'll be the first one or if it'll be a second or third one. We'll see. But I'll continue to just mention that the traits all have this binary kind of flavor to it. Pretty much. There'll be some slight differences, but we'll see this as we begin to compare all of them. Okay. So that's the one about religion, and especially the trait of plus or minus being Christian or not. Okay. And Christian is kind of an open, kind of multiple flavor thing. but it will usually include the Catholics, the Protestants, the Anglicans, Episcopalians, and a few other, and the whole mainline Christianity, traditional, mainline Christians, um, and then the evangelicals, and then if you look at actually the whole actually Protestant Christianity, if you really think about it, a huge, the, if you look at the history of Protestant Christianity, um, I mean, it began, yeah, in England with Henry VIII. So I mean, it actually started way, way earlier in 800 with Saint Patrick. Okay, but I'm not going to go back all the way to that one because here we're not. I'm not trying to do a whole historical archaeology of Protestant Christianity. That's not what I'm trying to do that here. There are other books you can go read about that, but if you look at the claims at the beginning of the Anglican Church, it's Saint Patrick, and then the basically the whole Anglican Communion will begin to cite more about Henry VIII and his wife, and he was Catholic, but he wanted to get divorced. He have another wife, so he kind of opposed the Pope, and then the whole scene. Okay, and that's what began. That's what officially began really what is called the Anglican Church, which is the religion, the official state religion in the United Kingdom. Okay, well, England, and then that the whole United Kingdom. But the United Kingdom had other territories too, and that has caused a lot of wars over history too. So I don't want to begin to do another historical debate here of all this, but I just want to I want to bring it back to how Americans are a kind of a derivative of that. So there has been the Anglican religion did start in Britain. Well, it's Ireland if you want, but okay. Um, but as it crossed over to America with the Pilgrims and with other flavors of that, the majority of uh, okay, there were Methodists too in England too, and all that, but I'll say that let's say that the markedness of Protestant religions, the majority of what we know today and what has changed and what has evolved and what is talked about and everything. Yeah, there were the Lutherans, of course, in the Germany, but a lot of the stuff that we talk about now comes from how that has evolved in the United States over the past century. I mean, if you look at that whole book again, Search for Christian America. It talks a really good thing about the whole colonialism, all the colonies, the whole period of the the that whole period of the Enlightenment and all that. But now I kind of want to bring it to let's come to the 1900s and when Protestantism, the whole Pentecostal movement happened, and then the charismatics coming out of that Pentecostal movement. They begin in the 1900s, and then now with the whole kind of revolution with evangelicals in the 1960s, um, which corresponds with other things in the culture at the same time, right? So there were other things happening in the same culture the whole time with hippies and all that kind of stuff. Um, and anti-Vietnam. We're going to get to We're going to get to the whole Vietnam thing too in another chapter, right? But there's other things happening in parallel. So these are not individual things that are happening just compartmentalized. They are all happening in parallel. Thank you, Daniel Skalberg, for your history class, because you helped me think about all these things that were happening in parallel. They're the different topics, but they're all lining up at the same points in time. Daniel Skalberg, you're a great history teacher, an excellent history teacher, because you taught me to think multi-parallelism, not just one single line of thought. Okay. And so you've got the whole. If we think about the whole thing of Christianity, again, we're talking about pro being Christian or not being Christian, and representing America or being the majority of America, or what America thinks it is the majority. And I'm not saying all Americans are Christian. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that they believe that. And there are lots of surveys. There are tons of surveys out there that you can see that say that the majority of Americans believe in God. and believe in that. There's this whole thing about that, but that's kind of a fuzzy thing, right? But there's actually an underlying thing that it's the Christian God, and that tends to be the Protestant Christian God. I mean, the Catholic one too. I mean, it's the Christian God. Okay, um, and so and if you look at the whole history of all of the divisions, many of the Protestant flavors have come from what's happened in America. Look at Episcopalian, was a split off from the Anglicans, and it's the whole focus on it is in North America, in the United States of America. Um, that's where all the whole Episcopalian differences with Anglicans. But if you really look at the whole the primary, all the doctrine and everything down to even to the liturgy and everything, it's all the same. It's just, hey, we're the American flavor of it. Okay. Hmm. Look at the whole Baptist movement and the Southern Baptist. And it depends on which Baptist you are now, right? They got so many different flavors of Baptist. It's all split up by split up by split up because of flavors, because of preferences. Not, and a lot of those preferences are not about major doctrinal things. It's about a lot of these little things that are, you baptize the child under water or not, or you got. I mean, a lot of this is, and I don't want to go into all the details of this because I got another book, but this one I want you to kind of feel it's this Christian versus the rest, or the non. Okay, it's not the rest, it's the non. And this is a really important thing how Americans perceive this because it comes out in the surveys. It comes out what the belief is that we believe in God, the Christian God. And this is very different from other cultures where tolerance, and Americans don't tend to tolerate if you're not Christian. It's kind of like, well, you're not, you're bad. Whereas a lot of other cultures, they respect the fact that you might have one belief that's different from another, and they're brought up. And I'll say again, the French are brought up that you don't, you allow everybody to have tolerate to everybody have their point of view, and you allow everybody able to talk about it equally and have equal opportunity. Or if you take it away, you take it away for everybody. Okay, so that's what the French have done. They take it away for everybody, and like prayer in the schools or whatever. But Americans get it. You got to have prayer in the school. See, this is the thing. You got to keep now, and you got a lot of the Christians over the past, I don't know, the past 50 years. Um, I mean, look at the whole movement with James Dobson, and uh, and focus on getting influence on the government, and to influence government, and to about bring prayer back into the schools, bring it back into schools. What did it ever actually exist? That's the big question. Did it actually really exist, or are we just saying it existed because we were Christian in the past, right? And came from the Christian. See, this is the whole thing. This is the thing to really dig deep. And did it really exist? There's this kind of a way to say we want to have influence. We want to be influencers. Um, so I challenge us to kind of dig deep, much more deeper than just believing what people say. Don't believe what I'm saying here, okay? I mean, don't just believe what I'm saying here. I want you to dig deep and find it for yourself. But I've dug a lot too. I did a lot of dug. Go look at my resume, my curriculum vitae. That's all you need to see, because I get enough. I've done enough studies to have I have enough degrees to kind of back up what I'm saying. So, but this whole thing, I want you to kind of begin to feel this binary approach, especially with Christian religion, um, and how that influences being accepted, or accepting others, or accepting other points of view, or not accepting other points of view, and tolerating. And Americans in general don't seem to tolerate other religions that aren't the one that is supposed to be the majority religion. And this is kind of weird because the whole thing of saying that we're not supposed to, we're allowing everybody. See, the Constitution says, it doesn't say that we have to favor Christianity at all. But there's a whole claim that it is the religion of the state, which it's not. It's not. So a lot of people actually don't know their Constitution very well. A lot of the Americans don't know their Constitution well, but they claim it. And there's other points we're going to talk about too, where they don't know their Constitution as much as they claim. Um, I'm gonna say they because I'm talking a bit because I'm writing a book, right? So I'm writing. I don't want to say we because it doesn't reflect necessarily my point of view. So I'm being careful with the we. It's a we non-inclusive, and this does exist in some language, or you can say we, but I'm not including myself in the we because I'm writing a book about. It's kind of more. I'm writing a biography. I'm not writing. I'm speaking a biography rather than writing an autobiography. Okay, because I'm recounting this as someone who has reflected on, thought about it for a long period of time, living outside of it, but trying to explain it. And so I'm going to explain a lot of things, many of the things that I don't agree with, or I not say that I don't agree with, that I understand fully, and I can't explain it very well because I brought up one of it, and some things I can understand very well, and I'm partially believe with, um, but I can explain things I don't necessarily believe myself but I understand it and I can explain it well enough to do that to others, um, by trying to be neutral about it and to be accepting that other people have different points of view. So I'm actually being non-American about all this. Okay, you can say that. I'm actually being tolerant of many different things here, which is not always the case I've seen in my American kind of others that come from America, live in America, and all that. So I'm not being judgmental. I'm just kind of trying to, again, my goal here is to help others understand, others who are not Americans, who are living in America, but actually people from other countries who live in other countries. They have to deal with Americans. They have to deal with how to work with them and how to do that to be able to get a business deal or how to work in government relations or whatever, in NGOs kind of stuff, whatever. It doesn't matter. Just to be able to work with Americans because Americans have a different point of view. And so a lot of these overlapping things, and religion is one of these things that overlaps into other points and coincides and converges with things. So let's get on to some of the other points that are just as equally interesting and complex.